Welcome back, everybody. Monday morning rolls on. Jeff Kolpak will join us about a half hour. We'll chat some golf, Bison hoops as well. That's coming up at the top of the hour. But each and every Monday in this time slot, I don't care if it's middle of March Madness. We talk football in this program. We do it every day. We certainly do it every Monday with Sam Herter, who joins us from Hero Sports in BetMGM. As we're getting closer. The Bison actually opens spring football a week from today. So there's no shortage of storylines to chat about on that, which we will later this week. Head football coach Tim Polasek will join us. I know you had the Bison boss on your podcast. What did you glean out of your visit with Tim Polasek?
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. Went about 30, 35 minutes with Coach Polasek. And as you know, he's a great interview. Very passionate, and it doesn't give like the coach speak or anything like that. Always gives good in-depth answers. And so we covered a variety of topics from just the championship run to realignment to coaching staff and having former players on his staff. We talked a little bit about the quarterback competition, and I thought that was maybe most interesting because I said it too, like I didn't know how to phrase it. Like, should I phrase it as quarterback competition or is Cole Payton the guy? And Coach Polasek, kind of made it sound like it is going to be a quarterback competition, and ideally he doesn't want it to go into fall camp, but if it does, that's fine too. And so I still think it's probably Cole Payton's job to lose, but it's not like, all right, it's Cole Payton's offense for sure. Like, because the other guy, could also push him and maybe get some reps as well. I think maybe Coach Polasek might have mentioned like both guys, getting some reps early on in the season. I think maybe he mentioned that as well. So that was maybe a big takeaway there.
Yeah, Nathan Hayes certainly got some momentum after how he played after Peyton got hurt, and that's certainly a story. I've talked about it. I think a lot of people think it's just a fait accompli that Cole Payton is going to be the starter, and that very well may be the case, but I think they just want to see how Cole is health-wise. I don't think they have any issues there, but to see how the start of spring practice goes, which is going to be certainly entertaining.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of the classic. Everyone loves the backup quarterback. I remember going back to 2012 or even 2013 for a little bit. People were calling for one Carson Wentz to take over when Brock had his struggles, and then of course, Cam Miller kind of dealt with that as well. People calling for Cole Payton, and now Cole Payton gets is the front runner for the starting job, and now people are maybe intrigued with Nathan Hayes with what he showed. But yeah, I think that is certainly interesting because how often do we have to cover NDSU when there is not a quarterback uncertainty, but a bit of a question mark as far as, who is going to be that guy. So that makes it a bit more intriguing.
What did your takeaway? I know you talked to him about his time in the FBS and the changes in FCS. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think he gave a good answer because I asked Coach, like, when he left after the 2016 season and he came back last year, like a lot of teams had left the FCS that he played or he coached against. And then meanwhile, some other teams had stepped up like UIW and Mercer and Idaho and even Abilene Christian. They were pretty fresh to the FCS back in 2016. And Abilene Christian gave NDSU a pretty good game for 2.5 quarters there in the second round. And, Coach kind of reflected on like some of the battles they had against Georgia Southern and Coastal Carolina, and talked about App State a little bit and now how they're all out of the FCS, obviously. And I think he gave a good answer of other teams have stepped up, but also just you kind of have to be on your toes a little bit in college football in general because so much is changing. And I mean, if you really want to dig into what he's saying, he kind of in a sense reference like NDSU has put themselves in a good position to, make moves. If anything happens, you kind of have to be on your toes and ready when those changes happen. And I think he kind of referenced that a little bit that, NDSU has put itself in a good spot. If, dominoes fall a certain way, they have to be ready to, if an invite comes or if, different things shake out, different subdivisions. We talked about that very briefly about like, is there going to be a third subdivision in college football? And he mentioned where do we land on that? Where do our rivals South Dakota State land on that? Where do the Montana schools land in that ever-changing shift? And so it wasn't a super in-depth conversation about, realignment.
Yeah.
But we talked about it a little bit, and I think you can maybe glean some of the stuff maybe he was referring to.
I was joking with you off air yesterday. I was watching a little bit of the Ivy League championship game, and immediately I went to that this coming fall we're going to have that finally where the Ivy is going to participate in the FCS playoffs, and that drama on that last Saturday of the regular season, which has never been there. It has never been there for the Ivy League. Now actually will be there, Sam. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's in. We probably talked about this when that announcement first came out. Like, does the Ivy League have the ability to become or have like multiple teams become an FCS juggernaut?
Yeah.
They have that ability, but do they want, like, do they have the want to do that? Because it's gonna take money, it's gonna take facilities, it's gonna take NIL, and I don't know how much they really want to dive into that part of new age college football of NIL. I already know they've decided not to opt into the house settlement, so there won't be revenue sharing. How they schedule, they're still starting like 2 or 3 weeks after everyone else. Like, does Harvard want to schedule North Dakota State
Yeah.
in the non-conference? Does Princeton want to schedule Montana State, or do they kind of want to stick and keep on scheduling CAA schools and Patriot League schools? And another thing too with the Ivy League is they don't allow graduate players
Correct.
to play. And so if you go through my FCS to FBS transfer, you'll see a lot of Ivy League guys on there, a lot of really good Ivy League players. Well, the reason for that is they graduated and they can't play their grad year, their fifth year at their Ivy League school, so they have to go to the FBS. A lot of them land in the Big Ten or the Big 12, and so that rule probably won't ever be adjusted. But if they could adjust that and they can keep some of their guys for a fifth year, that would make them even more competitive. And so I think it's cool that they are now in the FCS playoffs because it gives us like more well-known brand names. How competitive they're going to
Right.
be, I don't know. I think that honestly is up to them because they have the resources to be a top teams in the FCS, but do they have the want in the investment to do that? I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, that's the big question on this going forward on what the amount of money, resources they're going to spend on it. They clearly get talented players, but in this day and age, talent only gets you so far. You got to actually spend the money. You got to have the facilities to compete. If they do that, boy, I think the sky's the limit. Frankly, if they're willing to invest, they can be really good. A lot of those schools can be really good in FCS football.
Yeah, and they have a good name recognition. They
Yep.
have a proud alumni base as well, and so I mean, it could take Harvard losing 52-10 in Brookings before Harvard says like we don't like this, like we're too proud to go into the playoffs. And I think that like they'll say the reason they didn't enter the playoffs before is the FCS playoffs is because they academic reasons. I also think they like to end the season with the game, the big rivalry game. But I also think a part of it too is like, do they really want to go in the playoffs and eventually get blown out? Like they're not going to say that out loud, but there is a lot of pride there. And so it might take a couple of thumpings to get either
Yeah.
the administration or the alumni to say let's change some things, because now we're in the playoffs. It's fun until it's not fun anymore because we're exiting the playoffs in a pretty embarrassing
Right.
fashion. Then maybe they might adjust how they view things and run things to be more competitive in the FCS playoffs.
It's never too early to start looking ahead to games. I had a couple I wanted to throw at you to start the season for weeks 1, 2, and 3. There's nothing in week 0 that really got my attention unless you want to throw Mercer and Davis at me, which I could entertain that. But the first Saturday of the season, 3 games that stood out to me. The Sac State South Dakota State game is going to be awfully interesting. Dan Jackson's first game as head coach of the Jackrabbits. All the hype around Sac State, if they're any good, I guess we're going to find out there in that game in Brookings. And then USD with its new coach and Travis Johansson at Iowa State, and UND with its new coach and Eric Schmidt at Kansas State. All 3 of those jump off the page to me, Sam, for that opening week of the season.
Yeah, I think those will be interesting, especially Sac State going to South Dakota State. I think that could really be a challenging game for South Dakota State because, and you could flip it around and say the same thing about Sac State
Yep.
going to South Dakota State, just as far as the preparation and, how do you watch film on this team when they have more so for Sac State, a new system with the go-go offense and, not a lot of transfers coming in. That's very difficult to prep for. And I think Sac State is riding a lot of momentum. I guess just off the field with all the hype, they're getting behind them. So I think that could be a really good game, really good test, and a really good gauge for South Dakota State. And then, yeah, those two FCS versus FBS games, I think will be intriguing because I think South Dakota, if you had to pick one team, like who's going to be the team to challenge NDSU, because the Bison are obviously, the easy favorite going into next season. Who's going to be their top challenger? I think South Dakota is the pretty easy answer there with what they're coming back, with who they have coming back. And so that'll be a good gauge for South Dakota going to Iowa State. And then UND as well. You can kind of, for me, I can sense from afar just kind of a rejuvenation in that program, maybe some new energy with Coach Schmidt going in there. They have a pretty good amount coming back on offense. Quarterback competition, I think, will be intriguing if the San Diego State transfer can go in there and push for the starting job. So I think UND is bound for a pretty good year. Are they going to go to Kansas State and win?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is South Dakota going to go to Iowa State and win? I don't know. But if they make it a 7-point game going into the fourth quarter, I think that's a good gauge for those two teams.
One other one I'll point out here before we got to wrap is the week 2, the Jackrabbits get Sac State. Then they got to go to Bozeman and play at Montana State, which that game the Cats have been waiting for that since the end of the game in the regular season 2 years ago, where Montana State still thinks they won that game, and the ref overturned the touchdown at the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, South Dakota State and Montana State have kind of developed a nice rivalry, and even Montana State and North Dakota State. I don't know if it's a rivalry, but it's like a playoff type of rivalry with how often the Bison and the Bobcats meet up. But yeah, I think that is a great game, because the week before that, Montana State is going to Oregon. And so that's, unless there's a huge upset there, that's 0-1 right there. I don't know if Sac State will beat South Dakota State, but it wouldn't shock me at all. And so there's a chance that both Montana State and South Dakota State could be looking at 0-2 records, with whoever loses that game in week 2. And so that's a great test for Montana State, South Dakota State, just because we don't know a whole lot about Montana State. I think the Bobcats have more guys coming back than maybe people realize. If you just look at their 2 deep, they have a decent amount coming back, but it's the All-Americans, it's the first team all-conference level guys that they're missing. And so there's a good core coming back from Montana State, but they also have a lot of question marks just because they lose All-American quarterback, All-American running back, some really good defensive players as well. And so just a really intriguing non-conference game there in week 2.
And you know what? You and I have been begging for these kind of games. It's okay if you're 0-2, but your losses are what they are. That's not going to hurt you. That shouldn't at least hurt you in the eyes of the committee. Schedule these games. This is what we want to see.
Yeah, I think strength of schedule is a big deal, and
we saw that last year.
It obviously creates excitement as well, just with some of these fun matchups. I mean, even I think it's either week 1 or week 2, Eastern Washington and UIW play like that. That might be 55-52, and one of those teams might not even be a playoff team by year's end. But you see Eastern Washington versus UIW, and you go, okay, that's as a casual FCS fan, you go, okay, I'll tune into that one. I know those two programs well, and so it is good to see some of these non-conference games being scheduled.
It's great to see you, bud. Thanks so much for the time. We'll talk next week when the Bison have opened up spring ball. Okay.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday, talk some FCS football. We do get our fix in here even in the middle of March, and we do it at 9:30 each and every Monday. We'll break. We come back. We'll wrap up our first hour. Got a couple emails to get to. Big second hour plan. Jaden Hale will join us from the state champion Horace Hawks at 10:30. We roll on Hot Mic after this.